Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Moving Markets podcast for Monday, June the 9th, 2025, brought to you by Safe Option Strategies. I am Jeffrey Dunyan. I say that because I know most of you know exactly who I am, but we're like a lot of places trying to use a little more modern technology, and that includes AI. And if I actually mention my name at the beginning of this podcast, then when we have AI generate some content description and keywords and things like that, it gets everything a little more accurate. It makes it a little bit better. So to me, it seems weird to introduce myself when I know most people listening to this podcast are already members of the program, but we do allow this podcast to be listened to by other people. So I guess all I could say is get used to it. I might be introducing myself at the beginning of each podcast whenever we do it. So anyway, welcome. Glad to have you here on a Monday morning. The U.S. stock market has been open for a little over just over 30 minutes. Dow Jones Industrial Average struggling a little bit, but the S&P up a fraction, and the NASDAQ actually so far having a pretty decent day, only up 0.25%. But I think we've almost become too accustomed to these intraday moves that are 0.75% to 1% to 1.25% to 2%. And the reality is, if you got a 0.25% movement every single day on each one of your indexes, whether that's up or down, if the consistency is much more in one direction than the other, you're talking about pretty good sized market moves once everything plays out. I mean, think about if we had 0.25% to the upside 4 of the 5 days this week, just 0.25%, 4 of the 5 days this week, and one day we gave back 0.25%, we're still up 0.75% on the week. And if you took 52 weeks in the year times 0.75%, you would talk about a stock market that was up, I believe, over 40% or close to 40% on the year. And I can't remember the last time when one of the major indexes was up more than 40% on the calendar year. And I think you've got to go back to 2008 to find a time when we were down more than 40% on the calendar year. And I think each one of the 3 major indexes in 2008 was down around 50%. So it's interesting when you put it in that perspective. I mean, as of right now, 33 minutes into trading today, percentage wise, we're moving what I think would be considered a good normal percentage. On the Dow, it's to the downside. On the NASDAQ, it's to the upside. And on the S&P, we're just about dead flat. And I think the news that is moving things today, what are driving these markets today, is really a mixed bag. You've got the optimism of these trade talks that are being held in London today with China and the U.S. China getting on the same page with China, in terms of trade negotiations, is a huge deal. It cannot be understated or underplayed, because it is a big deal. If we can get to some type of a deal with China where we're no longer talking about big tariffs or restrictions on products, and we can open things up a little bit more in a way that feels much more fair to the United States, that in and of itself is a really big deal. Now, in the backdrop of that, you've got to wonder, will China play by the rules that are set up? And there certainly is I would say, a substantial, lengthy history of China not following the rules that we set up. We agree with them to certain rules, and then they oftentimes cheat and don't play by those rules. So there's that kind of runs in the backdrop of anything that we do with China. But getting some agreement on stuff is at least a good step, and it's a huge step. So you've got that going on, and then you've got this situation happening in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is kind of the focal point right now, but this is stuff that's happening in different parts of the country. You've got ICE agents who are trying to round up and deport illegal immigrants into this country, and they are trying to focus on those illegal immigrants that have committed more crimes than just the crime of coming to the United States illegally. You got to remember, and I know this gets political, and some of you don't like the politics behind stuff, but these things have an effect on the markets, and that's why I talk about them. I don't try to make this a political platform, but I talk about this stuff because it has an impact on the stock market. I think in the backdrop of what's going on with these trade talks, you've got some concern about whether things are going to spiral more out of control than they already are in Los Angeles and in the state of California. So, they're trying to gather up the illegal immigrants and deport them. And you've got a lot of people, some who I think are probably here illegally and some who are not, that are really pushing back hard against these ICE agents and against the local police, so much so that Trump had to call in the National Guard. And now you've got the political debate with the Democratic leadership of California and some of their representatives there saying it's all Trump's fault because he called in the National Guard, even though everything we were seeing on the news and on the internet and on social media was showing us that things were spiraling way out of control before Trump ever weighed in. And people are nervous about that. People are concerned about that. They're concerned that if this spirals too far out of control, that it could be very damaging to the stock market. At some point in time, even if the markets are kind of shrugging it off right now, at some point in time, you've got the real possibility that the markets are not going to continue to shrug it off, that they're going to get more nervous and more concerned. So we'll see what happens. We are at the very beginning of the trading week, and I know right now I'm breaking the pattern of normally doing a podcast at the end of the day when the markets close on Monday. But I didn't want to go too far into the trading day today without talking about what was going on, because I'm a little bit surprised that the markets are shrugging off some of the domestic turmoil, some of the domestic unrest and concern. I'm happy the markets are shrugging it off, but I'm a little bit concerned. The other reason I wanted to get on this morning is because we've got a lot of Triple Play members that, like me, had Dell stock put to them over the weekend. We had a 114 strike short put that expired in the money. And when that happens, you have stock put to you. That's the bad news, is that we had that stock put to us. The good news is that in addition to the credit we received from that option expiring worthless, we made another $500, and it was actually a little bit more than that with the sale of the Dell stock this morning. When stock is put to you at 14 and you can turn around and sell it, I believe, I'm going to tell you right now what I got out with. I think I got out with about 465. Let me look at the exact amount I got right at the open this morning. Sorry, I'm looking at this on another screen. Right at the open this morning, I was able to sell my Dell stock at 114.63. So I'm going to punch that in here. I was able to get out at 114.63. So, that made it to where our Dell position, even though it went against us and trended horribly against us, through a couple of simple adjustments, we were able to get out of Dell with a very, very small loss relative to our overall position. So we're still up very, very nicely in our Triple Play stuff. We took a loss on Marvell. We made great money on NVIDIA, made a little bit more than our full target profit. If you stayed in right until the end of the day on Friday, you made more than your target profit on Dell. I think on NVIDIA, we were shooting for 20%. We got out at almost 27. So we did great on that, more than made up for the little bit of loss we took on Dell and Marvell. And this morning, I sent out 2 new trades, one on the diamonds and one on Palantir. We filled on the diamonds. We have not filled on Palantir yet. I will let everyone know if and when we do fill on that Palantir trade, and we will probably put one additional trade in today. And then I'll be back on tomorrow morning to talk about it. I'm not going to do a podcast at the end of the day today since I did one this morning, even though, like I said, I'm kind of breaking the mold. Normally Monday, we do it at the close of the market, and the rest of the week, we do it at the open of the market. I wanted to talk about what we did with Dell so that if you have any confusion on that, you know where to go with that one. And then we'll get an additional new trade out, not only for the triple play members, but also we'll get a new trade out for regular Safe Option Strategies members. I've got a couple different things in mind. We'll get that out at the end of the day. And then tomorrow morning, we'll talk about it in the podcast. So have a great rest of your Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. And we will be back live about 30 minutes after the market opens tomorrow morning. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.